Hello, everyone. I am Danish from ETTelecom. We have Mr. Jagbir Singh, CTO of Vodafone Idea, to talk about 5G and how Indian telecom operators, specifically Vodafone Idea, is preparing for the new technology. So, Mr. Jagbir is a fairly known name in the Indian telecom industry. He has worked with almost all the private telecom operators in the country. I think this is his first media appearance after taking up the role with Vodafone Idea. So, let's begin the fireside chat with Jagbir. So Jagbir, thank you for agreeing to do this. So my first question to you is how Vodafone Idea is preparing for the 5G technology. What is your strategy after you have taken up the role? How you are preparing or modernizing the company's networks?
Okay, thank you, Danish, for inviting me for this conference. So first, let me tell you, I think we all know that the 5G deployment initially is going to be NSA-based architecture, not the SA. NSA means non-standalone. So basically, it's going to be a combined core for 4G and 5G. And you know that fairly we had the good mid-band spectrum, which is basically, I would say for us is 1800 and 2100. This spectrum can be used as a coverage layer. I know that you need to have a lot of spectrum to really good to give the good experience on 5G, but at least to have a good experience in terms of coverage of 5G, I think we have the right spectrum available with us. So what are the hardware we have deployed in past 2 to 3 years? We are ensuring that this hardware at least is ready for 5G deployment. Yes, this hardware will require to have the new software upgrades, so which can be done as and when we get the spectrum and we want to launch the 5G services. So first is whatever radio hardware we are deploying is actually ready for 5G. Second is I think we can use the dynamic spectrum sharing as a feature between the 4G and 5G. And this feature already being tested and we are deployed in our network, not for 5G purpose, but actually for 4G. And so we are tested very well. This feature works very well. So as and when we want to launch 5G services, the same spectrum, same hardware with the upgrade of the software, we can deploy 5G using the DSS. So this is the second point. The third point is actually, I think we can also do some sort of the carrier aggregation between the FDD and TDD to deploy 5G services to get the benefit of the spectrums to give the better throughput and better experience for the customer. So I think these are the three things in the radio side that we are trying to ensure that we are ready for 5G going forward. And other than this, I think we will be focusing on the services and we will be focusing on how do we do the automation of, the deployment in such a way that we can offer the services like network slicing, etc. I think we'll talk on the transmission and the core subsequently, but I think from radio point of view, this is what I wanted to share with you.
Sure. So while we touched upon the radio part, the most crucial part of the networks are indeed the transport and core. In the past, Vodafone Idea has talked about how they are modernizing that as well. So do you think that the core part and the transport part or the backhaul is ready for 5G when it comes to the Vodafone Idea's network?
I think I will not say completely ready, but we are moving in that direction. So let me go, part by part. So let's talk about the first core network. So the core network is actually now all the deployment, what is happening in the Vodafone Idea network is all based on the cloud. It's all virtualized. And whether it's EPC, whether it is like IMS or it's going to be SPC, DRA, all the core elements, HSS, HLR, everything is actually based on the virtualized network. So everything is getting put into the cloud. In addition to this, I think we have the 200 plus data centers in India. All those data centers can be used to deploy the, I would say, the core functions closer to the customer, which could be used to offer the low latency services and also can help in doing the edge computing. So this is the another part of the cloud network and the virtualization. So this is how we are getting ready for this. The third is, in addition to this, I think we need to ensure that the cloud is going forward should be the native cloud and also container-based. Once we have the, the core network virtualization based on the native cloud and container-based, this will really enable us to have the flexibility of the services. That means we can have the multiple options for the deployment. In the sense, we can deploy the services on the fly. We can segregate the network capacities and the performance depending on the service requirement. We can actually have the highly secured network, and we can have the flexibility to add the capacity anytime as and when we want to have it. So I think that is a direction. And again, I would come back to the initial deployment is again going to be NSA based. So our core network, which is a cloud-based, is actually ready for the NSA deployment architecture. As and when in future we come to requirement of the assay, then I don't see any problem in integrating the assay architecture with the current existing NSA. So I think we are, I would say, is getting ready towards the 5G deployment on the current cloud and virtualized network. I think the another important part here is, I think I'm going a little fast, but just to, I want to emphasize on that. All the flexibility of the network and the services will come because of the virtualization in access, because of the virtualization in the core network. In order to get the full benefit of this container-based and the native cloud, I think we need to ensure that we do the maximum automation in the network. That means I need to deploy AI ML based softwares where I can actually use the infrastructure to deliver the best performance and better customer experience. And that is the part I'm sure the whole industry is working on that taking the benefit of this virtualization, I think we need to ensure we have the right software available, which are the AI ML based, which can actually learn almost on a real-time basis the consumer behavior, the customer services requirement, the performance which is being delivered to the customer, the performance of the network. I think all that can be taken and analyzed and customized if we have the AI ML based automation available in the core network.
Sure. When we discussed 5G with other telecom operators in India and globally also, Open RAN is emerging as a clear trend towards the new technology. Do you see that while we have legacy network technologies in the country, do you think that Open RAN could be one of the elements which will become the part of the future 5G network and then enable telecom operators to offer better services at reduced cost? Do you see any prospects for Open RAN technology?
Okay, so let me come on this. Danish, you also asked me for the transmission, so I'll come after the Open RAN on the transmission part.
Sure.
Okay, so I think on, let's see the Open RAN and Cloud RAN, mostly being used, these terms in the industry. So what is the difference? First thing is whether it's a Cloud RAN and Open RAN, both are talking about actually the virtualized radio network. So when we say virtualized, actually we are dividing now or doing the disaggregation of the hardware and software on the virtualized platforms. Now, this disaggregation of hardware and software will give you the benefit to use the hardware, which is open source hardware available, code-based servers from the industry. So any vendor can supply that, and you can buy the software from any other vendor. So this will lead to have the flexibility of deployment, I'm sure reduction of the cost. So this is the right direction for the industry to move on. However, in case of the Cloud RAN, you can still have the disaggregation of hardware and software. But again, I would say they are tightly integrated in terms of that you can't use everybody's software and everybody's hardware. So it's still not an open interface. It's a cloud-based, it's virtualized, but it's still not open. However, in case of the Open RAN, the only difference is this interface between the BBU, we call it baseband unit, which is getting divided in two parts. We call it as a physical layer, file layer, and the MAC layer. The MAC layer is basically a control plane. That control plane can be centralized, and the physical layer is decentralized. That means that this can coexist with the radio head-end, radio unit. This will help in terms of giving the real-time low latency services, but at the same time, Now, the resources can be controlled from the control plane, which is basically a MAC layer, which is mostly getting centralized or getting into the edge. So then this will provide the flexibility. In this case, now we can have the MAC layer from one vendor, file layer, which is a physical layer from another vendor. So that is basically talking about the Open RAN. So there's a difference in the Cloud RAN and Open RAN. Now coming to this Open RAN reality, see what are the deployment they have been, especially the mostly being deployed, using 2T, 2R or the 4T, 4R deployment for FDD and TDD. When we talk about the 5G deployment or the massive MIMO for 4G, where we get the maximum benefit of beam formation, and that deployment is anywhere near to 60/40 and 64R. I haven't seen or heard with my limited knowledge any deployment of Open RAN in 60/40 and 64R. That means the benefit of Open RAN of the beam formation technology will not be available immediately. But for sure, vendors are working this direction, and one day this should be available. So that is the one part. Second part is, I think, in Open RAN, it's like it has to follow the 3GPP standards. Because the benefit of these standards will be then you can have the mix and match of the vendors, hardware vendor and software vendors. And at the same time, you can predict the performance of the infrastructure or the deployment. So I think there also I keep hearing the mix. There are a lot of interworking required between the two vendors. And so still we can't say really open is open or is following the openly 3G standards. But at the same time, as I said, it's a good direction to go where we can get the flexibility of the services and we can actually get maybe the cheaper infrastructure. The last point or the another 2 point actually on this Open RAN is going to be like, we call it something called like allocation of the resources, radio resources. When it's done by the scheduler. The scheduler is actually has to be common and it has to be like a real time. So when you want to do any Open RAN deployment between, for example, 4G, 5G, or between the vendor for 5G only, then the scheduler has to be common. So I'm not saying again, the scheduler is actually, again, specific to the vendor and it's not maybe truly the real time. I think that is another area where still work to be done. And the most important part, whether it's going to be Open RAN or the Cloud RAN, the most important part is the interface in the RAN, which we call it the northbound interface, upward side, where we manage the RAN infrastructure. I think that interface needs to be common. Whether we deploy the integrated RAN, we deploy the Cloud RAN, we deploy the Open RAN, that interface has to be open. So then that means what I'm saying, then I can manage my radio resources very well. I can use my SON technology. I can have the control on beam formation by deploying, again, artificial intelligence, machine learning-based software modules to manage the radio infrastructure irrespective of the vendor deployment in such a way that all infrastructure, even if there are 2 vendor, 3 vendor, since the interface from the radio network is open, all resources can commonly be controlled and can be used in more efficient manner to offer the consumer services based on their requirements. So I think the important part in the 5G is going to be automation of the infrastructure, automation of the deployment, automation of the services, and AI/ML enabled based software technologies to actually control the services part as well as the infrastructure part. So therefore, in summary, I can say whether the deployment is going to be Open RAN only or the integrated RAN, I think to me, it's a mix. It might be initially in first 2-3 years, could be integrated plus Open RAN, but for sure, everything's going to be virtualized.
Sure. And then obviously you wanted to share more on the transmission part.
Yeah, as far as the transmission part is, I think for us as Vodafone Idea, I would say that, we are moving in the direction. So I will divide in transmission 3 or 4 parts. One is So what are the microwave deployment we are doing in past 1 or 2 years? Everything we call it XPIC radio. That radio, actually microwave radio, that supports 500 Mbps to 1 Gbps. So I think that is at least the one hop of the 5G base station can be backhauled using the microwave. So whatever deployment we are going, mostly the deployment all is happening is XPIC radio. So getting ready to use this XPIC radio to backhaul the 5G base station traffic. Number two, I think what is important is going forward the daisy chain we have. What are the number of hops of the microwave we have? Better we reduce those hops to a single hop or the 2 hops maximum. So then we get the maximum bandwidth available for the backhauling the 5G traffic. So we are moving in that direction to reduce the number of hops. That's number two. Number three, we are increasing the fiber pops. So the fiber pop deployment is very important to backhaul the 5G traffic. Yes, it is expensive. It is time consuming. It's not going to be ready tomorrow. But I think I'm hoping there will be the government policy, there will be relaxation in terms of ROW, etc., to help the operators, to get the faster ROW, cheaper ROW, if possible, free of cost ROW for a given time window. And that will actually enable truly the 5G services backhauling. The another important part is I think everything is going to be layer 3 IP. So we need to ensure that the deployment of the transport network is IP from the access to the aggregation to the core. So we are moving in that direction. So we are upgrading our IP network and which will be ready actually slowly for the 5G networks. So these are the 4 points actually where we are working and we can make it our infrastructure ready for 5G. Lastly, I would say I think I'm hoping that along with the 5G spectrum, maybe like E-band spectrum is a very efficient spectrum for backhauling the 5G kind of traffic. I think can be bundled or can be given to backhaul the 5G traffic, because anyway the fiber network will take some time.
Sure. So it is going to be a mix of both fiber and the ENV band spectrum that will enable a better backhaul for 5G.
Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to use cases, we have already discussed fixed wireless access and let's say higher speeds on your mobile phones. But other than that, we have also discussed how industry use cases are going to be enabled by the 5G technology. What sort of new use cases you think that India should be enabling or should be focusing on developing when the 5G is commercially available?
I think the use case are, I would say, still in the stage of evolution. So everybody is working to find out the 5G use cases. To begin with, what are the deployment mostly have been around the fixed wireless access and the enhanced mobile broadband, EMBB, which we call it. So better broadband experience. But the use case, I'm sure, will be all for the consumer as well as for the enterprise or the industry segment. If I take the consumer part, I think anything to do with the real-time requirement, for example, AR, VR for the education. AR, VR to if we have our cricket match, everybody watch in India, you want to use the AR, VR actually to watch the cricket match. So AR, VR, maybe, any real-time applications. In addition to that, I think for the consumer, cloud gaming would be another good example, because gaming is something which is, popular. So these are the initially, I would say from the consumer point of view, in addition to fixed wireless and the enhanced broadband experience. Coming to the industry applications, I think being explored in the area of agriculture, health, manufacturing, utilities, energy, I think entertainment. So every area actually, people are exploring the use cases. So if I take example like health, doing surgery, remotely, taking the, expertise of the big surgeons, I think, again, that could be a good example, because we need a lot of medical support in our rural areas. For our agriculture, actually, we can have some IoT kind of, where we need the broadband connection, we need the massive IoT, we need, maybe some critical IoT, for example, running the factories Today we do the all factory automation. We have a lot of LAN WAN cabling, etc. Everything can be removed actually by having the 5G deployment. So automation of the factories, plants, health sector, agriculture sector, and maybe pushing the IoT more closer to the like user. I think these are the areas where we need to explore. But for sure, the 5G will be very handy because it offers higher bandwidth, very low latency, and I think everybody is talking in these segments. It becomes easier to get full ecosystem developed and take benefit of the ecosystem.
Sure, sure. So do you think that there is a need for a deeper collaboration between telecom operators and various industries in the country to develop new use cases on 5G?
I think the answer initially is yes. For example, manufacturing. You can go to car manufacturing plant, like you can actually do the whole automation of that plant. So we can have the pilot trial and then we can actually do that. So there's a lot of coordination and the co-working required. Same thing, the end devices. Like as I took the example of IoT, having the sensors, having the modules, actually 5G modules getting built into the car, getting built into the PCs, getting built into the, like every machine. I think a lot of interworking, coordinations, developing whole ecosystem, I think is required. And now since our Prime Minister is like making this dream of Make in India, I think it's a good time for us to support his dream. And we need to be like, in that direction that we develop, we as India, we actually develop whole ecosystem, right? From the sensors, devices, the software, the base stations, radio, cloudifications. I think it's like if we come all together, I think big opportunity for our country and to make that digital India, dream true and support our Prime Minister vision.
Sure, sure. Any last concluding comments, Jagbir? I'm sure you've covered everything from radio to transport and use cases, but any other thing that you would want to highlight?
I would say that, like 5G is going to be like very relevant for the India market. We need to certainly adapt to it. At the same time, I don't want to talk any commercial, but I think spectrum, I hope, will be available at the reasonable cost to enable the company like us actually to afford the deployment of the 5G technologies. So with this, I wish all the best for your conference, and I hope we'll be the digital nation by deploying 5G in the near future.
Okay, so on that note, let's conclude this fireside chat. And it was a pleasure to talk to you, and you've shared all those insight. And I'm sure it is going to be relevant for the entire industry. Thank you very much, Jagbir, for doing this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danish. Thank you very much for inviting me again. Thank you.